always chosen Susan Rice to be their villain.
Not only was Russia behind the attacks, that was widely reported, but that their purpose was to help Trump.
This attack that we've experienced is a form of war. It was a form of war on our fundamental democratic principles.
It's amazing that in that small, relatively small campaign, small circle, so to speak, that you would have so many people with so many deep connections to Russia. My impression is I wouldn't be surprised after all of this is said and done that some people end up in jail.
They're going to jail. Well, despite the hysteria, it looks like the Rice story is here to stay, at least for a while. Today, President Donald Trump suggested Rice may have committed a crime. Rice's spokeswoman described that as ludicrous. Well, Matt Miller once ran the public affairs office over at the State Department. Rather, the Department of Justice. He joins us now. Mr. Miller, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
So we've had, I think, every night for the past 3 months a debate on this show on the facts of the case. And I'm agnostic. I think Russia probably wants to do bad things to the United States, always has. But I try to debate, like, what do we know? And we still don't know anything. And so what I'd like to ask you about tonight is the psychological component to this. Is there a purpose for Democrats to make all policy discussions about Vladimir Putin and Russia a purpose beyond just sort of answering why they lost?
I think the purpose for Democrats, and I would hope it was the purpose for Republicans as well, is to find out what happened. Right. I think the biggest question that remains unknown is, was there collusion between the Trump campaign or Trump associates and the Russian intelligence services? That's a question the FBI is investigating. It's a question one committee in Congress is investigating well, and another has fumbled its investigation. I think that's the real reason.
Okay, but the Mounties, well, you just said it right there. The Mounties are on the case. I mean, you've got the FBI, and I presume you're not suggesting they're in the pocket of the Trump administration. And you've got the congressional committees working on this. So we sort of, it's in good hands. But the obsession with it, okay, well, if you think the FBI is corrupt, then just say so.
I wouldn't say Devin Nunes' investigation.
But, okay, but the Department of Justice is on this, okay? So you'd think that we could just stand back and say, we'll find out, and, we can make a judgment then. Instead, you just saw the montage we ran. You've got one congressman, the ranking member on the Intel Committee, saying that people are attacking Susan Rice implying because they're racist, or they don't like women or something. Then you have another member of Congress saying he knows exactly why Vladimir Putin did this. He's in Putin's head somehow. Then you have a third saying this is a form of war, like we're declaring war. And then you have a fourth saying people should go to jail. Talk about getting over your skis. This is a psychological condition at this point. They don't know anything that we don't know, and yet they're calling for war in jail. That's crazy.
I think we know that the President of the United States is under a federal criminal investigation into whether his campaign colluded with the Russians. That is potentially the most serious scandal in American history. Yeah. We know that the President of the United States in the campaign said things very favorable to Russia. We know that as president, he equated what happens in the United States with Vladimir Putin's murdering of journalists, murdering of dissidents. I mean, even if there was no collusion, what the president has done to endorse
said a dumb thing. Does that mean that he's in the pocket of Putin? So today, his administration indicated in public out loud that we're ready to go to war in Syria. That is directly at odds with Russia's central foreign policy aim right now.
Yes.
Now, look, that may be a good idea or a bad idea. I happen to think it's a bad idea. But that's not doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin. That's the opposite of it. And yet Democrats are so addled with this insanity, this conspiracy. They don't even recognize that's happening, do they?
I think what we're addled with is a desire to find out what happened.
But what do you make of that? What do you make of that? Hold on. If Trump is doing the bidding of unseen Russian saboteurs and Vladimir Putin himself, why in the world would he be attacking Russian involvement in Syria today and threatening war?
Well, first of all, let's wait and see what happens.
They just did.
Let's wait and see what happens with what he said today. But let's not ignore the fact that several days ago his administration said getting rid of Assad is no longer a priority. Something, a huge reversal of U.S. policy.
But I'm talking about,
and then several days later, lo and behold, Assad has the green light to gas his own people.
Look, if your point is they're inconsistent, that's a fair criticism. If your point is he's doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin, you're insane. Do you see the difference?
How
is this doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin? It's the opposite of what Putin
wants. This is one isolated thing. If you look at this,
it's not isolated. It's the biggest deal in the world.
Today it is. If you look at the pattern of Trump's behavior, his repeated calls for the breakup of the European Union with the United Kingdom, leaving the EU, with his playing footsie with nationalist parties in France, with his undermining our ally Angela Merkel in Germany. All of those things are things that Vladimir Putin wants. Those are things that are part of his global political agenda. This is why you're starting to freak me out.
And I have friends who are Democrats who are rational, high IQ people who make the same point, and they sound like LaRouche followers. They take things that are not connected and string them together into this theory of everything. Are you really saying that anyone who's in favor of Brexit or is suspicious of multinational organizations like NATO or the UN is on Putin's side?
Of course not.
That's unreasonable.
Of course not. I'm talking about all of the troubling pattern. Look, if these were just Donald Trump's isolated policy positions, and there wasn't this history of contacts between his campaign and Russian intelligence services, again, we don't know if there was collusion. It's being investigated, but we know that the FBI has found contacts between the campaign. If we didn't have Donald Trump in public in the middle of the campaign calling on the Russian intelligence services to find Hillary Clinton's emails, if we didn't have his campaign benefiting from a Russian intelligence operation, then we might sit back and go,
this sounds
yes,
like a vast conspiracy, and I'm trying to take you seriously. I really do try to take this seriously because, again, I'm not a supporter of Vladimir Putin's, but you're alleging a conspiracy so vast that it undermines, as you suggested, the foundations of our democracy. Now, there are thousands of Russian citizens living in the United States, heavily concentrated in and around New York City. They potentially pose a security threat. Do you believe we should intern them until such time as we find that they don't pose a threat?
Of course not.
What do you, why
That's
of course
silly.
not?
Of course
why is it
not.
silly?
That's silly. That's absolutely silly.
Why? If there are unseen Russian actors seeking to undermine the United States of America...
Because we don't put people in prison that we cannot prove
No, intern them, and we have done it before, and the Supreme Court has said it was fine.
And it was one of the biggest embarrassments and the worst things
I know Democrats supported it then. So my question is, if you really... Then should we take action militarily against Russia? If they're trying to undermine our democracy, why wouldn't we attack them militarily?
No, we shouldn't take military action because we don't want to start World War III.
Well, but they've already started. Wait, but hold on. I just played video. Ben Cardin, as your senator from Maryland, said this is an act of war. We're already at war, according to the Democrats, so why wouldn't we make it formal?
So I don't think it was an act of war. I think it was an act to subvert, to undermine our democracy. I don't think I don't think the next thing to suggest is that we go into nuclear war.
Look, I don't either, but then I'm not a Democrat.
I think we need to get to the bottom of what happened. And stop sideshows as Devin Nunes has tried to do, Donald Trump has tried to do, and get back into...
So there's only room for one line of inquiry in America. So anyone who says, wait a second, why did Susan Rice, a political appointee, spy on members of the Trump's transition? It's a legitimate question. Oh, you're doing the bidding of Putin. My question, though, is what does this have to do with the last election? So Hillary lost for a lot of reasons. Maybe Russia was one of them. I don't know. But the Democratic Party needs to figure out how to win the country and how to serve the country. So this has nothing to do with, like, the opioid crisis or the wage crisis or income inequality, which is real, or automation. Is anybody on the Democratic side spending any time thinking about those things and not just Putin?
Of course we are. I think it's possible to do more than one thing at a time. I think it's possible to go back and work on a message for the next election. I think it's possible to focus on solving the opioid crisis on a number of things. At the same time, I don't think we should ignore the fact that the President of the United States might have colluded with foreign power.
But we're not ignoring it. It has consumed all the oxygen in every newsroom in America, and the FBI and the congressional committees are on it. So here's my question, and it's not a non sequitur. The opioid crisis is killing 10 times the number of people the crack crisis killed. I don't hear anybody, and by the way, Republicans too, anybody in Washington behaving as if this is a civilization-ending crisis, which it is. Instead, they're talking about Russia. I think it's frivolous. Do you agree?
I would disagree that the President of the United States being under federal criminal investigation is frivolous. Maybe you don't think that's important?
Look, the purpose of political parties is to serve their voters, and the Democratic Party lost millions of people who had voted Democrat but then stopped and voted for Trump. Has there been any group of smart people sitting down, this Comey, Russia stuff, let's put it aside, and thought deeply about why didn't we appeal to them? What was wrong with our message? Does anyone think of that?
Yeah, so I think you're equating two things. I think on the political side, yes, there absolutely is a conversation we need to have about how to win the next election. Separate and apart, the concerns that we have about Donald Trump are serious concerns about the government of the United States and whether it was subverted by a foreign power and whether there are people in the White House who had close ties to the
I know what
president.
it is. We do it every night. There's whenever I talk to someone about this, there's this lack of blinking that freaks me out, and I really feel like you're going to sell me the Bhagavad Gita and give me a flower or something. No offense to you, Matt Moore. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, there is plenty more to be learned about Susan Rice's behavior, about all of this, but Democrats are already declaring her totally exonerated. Today, Congressman Adam Schiff of California said this.
Well, it certainly is a theory in search of a villain, and for whatever reason, the hard right has always chosen Susan Rice to be their villain.
But is it really that simple? As American citizens, you'd think we would have the right to know if our government is spying on us and to what extent they might be spying on us. You would also assume we have the right to be skeptical when a political appointee with a long track record of lying in public admits to spying on her political enemies and then claims there was no political intent. At the very least, you might want to know more about that, wouldn't you? But you don't have that right, says Congressman Schiff. Be quiet. Stop talking. Anyone who asks questions must be a tool of Donald Trump, or more likely, of the Kremlin itself. A disloyal American, in other words, working for the benefit of a hostile foreign power, a traitor. When did this happen? The left used to care about civil liberties a lot more than Republicans did in a lot of cases, but that was 50 years ago. Now that progressives control America's most powerful institutions, questioning the establishment is a threat to their authority. The civil liberties of individual Americans have become an unwelcome limitation on their power, so they ignore them. Liberals have become the man, and the rest of us can just shut up and obey. Time now for Twitter Storm, our forecast of social media's most powerful weather patterns. Tonight, a feud between our friend Brit Hume and the former Obama White House advisor Ben Rhodes. It all started when Brit retweeted a Fox News story about CNN's Don Lemon refusing to cover the Susan Rice story. Brit tweeted this: "This is just amazing. The story is clearly news, and refusing to report it is not the behavior of a news organization." Doesn't seem controversial, but Ben Rhodes replied this way, quote, "Bullying people into covering routine work of any senior national security official as news is a clear effort to distract from questions about Trump and Russia." Whoa, the Russia thing again. Brit responded this way: "Bullying? Please. And if it was so routine, why did Rice falsely claim on PBS she knew nothing about it? Great question. If it's not a big deal, why are you lying about it to Judy Woodruff?" Ben Rhodes responded this way. He retweeted another response to Brit by the Twitter user Grudge, who said, "Not one single intel expert has asserted anything here is anything but mundanely routine. Stop chasing Trump's fantasies. Nothing to see here. Be quiet and obey." That's tonight's Twitter Storm. Up next, there are 5-year-olds who weren't alive the last time the U.S. toppled a Middle Eastern government. That means it's time for a new war. Or is it? We'll debate it with a Republican senator. Also, despite warnings from the Trump administration, some cities are still deciding to become sanctuaries for illegal aliens. We'll talk to the mayor of Lansing, Michigan, which seems determined to turn down federal funds. We'll ask him why. Stay tuned. Well, a dreadful chemical attack occurred in Syria, and we warn you the footage is awful. Yesterday's attack was not the worst atrocity in 6 years of civil war there, but it should be a reminder that the country is a house of horrors. The question is, what should the U.S. do about that? Well, in Washington, the usual forces appear to be gearing up for war in Syria. President Trump repeatedly pledged to keep the U.S. out of that conflict, but today indicated that that position could change.
Well, I think the Obama administration had a great opportunity to solve this crisis a long time ago when he said the red line in the sand. And when he didn't cross that line after making the threat, I think that set us back a long ways, not only in Syria, but in many other parts of the world, because it was a blank threat. I think it was something that was not one of our better days as a country.
Meanwhile, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley also warned of a possible war there. Watch.
Yesterday morning, we awoke to pictures, to children foaming at the mouth, suffering convulsions, being carried in the arms of desperate parents. When the United Nations consistently fails in its duty to act collectively, there are times in the life of states that we are compelled to take our own action.
Senator James Lankford represents Oklahoma and serves on the Homeland Security and Intelligence Committees. He joins us tonight. Senator, thanks a lot for coming on.
Glad to be with you.
So the first thing that struck me about Ambassador Haley's remarks, apart from how horrifying this gas attack was her certainty about who did it. I'm certainly willing to believe the Assad government did it.
Right.
Done it before. But this took place 24 hours before she made this statement. This is an incredibly complex country with the number of actors we don't even know, the different factions fighting. That seems unknowable. How could anyone know for certain who did this 24 hours later?
Fixed-wing aircraft flying over the area and explosions happened. There's only 2 folks that do fixed-wing aircraft in that area, and that would be the Russians and be the Syrians, be Assad. So we can be pretty confident that it wasn't the rebel forces flying any kind of aircraft over that area. They don't have aircraft to even be able to fly. So you can have a great deal of certainty on it. And this is not the first time that we've seen Assad use chemical weapons. He's used chemical weapons consistently year after year after year. There's a lot of focus on it 4 years ago when he was using chemical weapons, but he's continued to use chlorine gas.
And this is not a defense of the Assad regime or their tactics of war, merely an acknowledgement that I've heard many people say we know for certain. You know, they went to Niger to buy yellow cake. You know, we know this. And to base policy on something 24 hours later does seem premature. I'm not saying reckless, but close to it.
Well, that is an area that we watch very closely in the intelligence community. We're able to track and be able to see flights coming in and out. We're able to watch. We're able to have satellite view on what's happening on the ground so we can track day to day what's occurring. So we have pretty good eyes on the sky of what's occurring.
Okay, so I will grant that for the sake of argument. To progress to this idea common among everyone I know in Washington, that in order to fight ISIS, we need to take out Assad. Now, Assad is, of course, fighting ISIS, maybe imprecisely, maybe ineffectively, but nonetheless doing so. How would that work? You take out the guy fighting ISIS, but it makes ISIS stronger?
So ISIS is really birthed out of two conflicts that have fell apart. One of them, ISIS is fighting against Assad, and the other one is the vacuum that was created in Iraq. Assad's been a ruthless thug, killing his own people. The civil war that rose up there in Syria was fighting against him. ISIS is simply joining into that. A lot of the recruiting worldwide was to be able to join the caliphate fighting against Assad. So ISIS' main recruiting tool has been Assad. And if you go back to the earliest days of the civil war, everyone in the region was focused on one thing, the removal of Assad.
Right, no, I remember. So the idea, if you take out the guy that ISIS doesn't like, it'll make ISIS weaker. Pardon my skepticism, but it does raise the question, if you take him out, and we, of course, could tomorrow if we wanted, who would run Syria?
Well, that has been the issue the Obama administration locked up on for years. They were waiting for someone organically to grow up to suddenly be the big dog in the area that everyone would respect. That's not going to happen. There is no unified rebel force fighting against Assad. It is a whole collection of basically neighborhood watch groups that this town, this town, this town all know that their life depends on Assad going down. They're not unified with each other. They're fighting for their families and also fighting against Assad. So the key thing that I hear from the leaders in the area is we have got to have the United States to engage to help select the next leader, international community come behind them, and to basically find a horse and to be able to bet on that horse. Because this is about Iran's involvement. The big issue here is Iran. But the last time we did this, I heard that exact argument was in Iraq, and the net effect was to vastly increase the power of Iran over Iraq, for one thing. So here's a quote, verbatim. We should stay the hell out of Syria. The rebels are just as bad as the current regime. What do we get for our lives and billions? Zero. That's from Donald Trump in 2013. He went on to say, ask, how would you treat Syria if elected president? I let them all fight each other, focus on the United States. Make our country great again as they fight their war, he said. Stay out of Syria, he said. I could go on. Do not attack Syria. Bad things will happen. How did a guy who ran on not attacking Syria wind up today with no warning at all, encouraging, hinting at a war with Syria? Right, the engagement with Syria. The way that happens is you actually get the intelligence information. You're tracking what's happening on the ground. You deal with the realities of 4 million refugees that are scattered all around the world, destabilizing the entire region. You see women and children gasping for their life and realizing the entire world is waiting on the United States to make a decision.
But I mean,
in whatever way that we
China
engage.
murders its dissidents, executes people for their body parts. So should we invade China? I mean, once you make, a la Samantha Power, the moral excesses of other countries a justification for going to war with them, where does it stop?
It does have a direct effect on us, though, and that's the issue. ISIS does want to mean to do us harm. Al-Nusra means to do us harm. Al-Qaeda fighting in the region means to do us harm. These are folks that have actually planned, coordinated, and prepared attacks to be able to come. And the big issue in Syria still is Iran. Iran is trying to form what they call their Shia Crescent, running everything from Lebanon all the way to Yemen. They are a direct threat when they move into Syria and are right next to Israel. So if you want to be able to stabilize the democracies in the area like Israel and to stand with our allies there, to keep Lebanon stable, to keep Jordan stable, you've got to be able to stabilize what's happening in Syria.
Senator, thank you for joining us.
You bet.
Up next, Lansing, Michigan just made itself a sanctuary city despite warnings from the administration that cities like that will lose millions in federal funds. Have they accidentally been drinking the water in Flint? Talk to the city's mayor. Plus, Obama went from an obscure state senator to the president very fast and with very little vetting from the press. A new biography coming out next month offers stunning details about his life before the Senate. We've got some details on that. Stay tuned. Well, the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, has made it clear he plans to target sanctuary cities, denying certain federal funds to places that refuse to cooperate with ICE in enforcing this country's immigration laws. But at least one city is doing it anyway, actually a bunch are. Despite the Trump administration's warnings, Lansing, Michigan, the city council there just voted to make itself, in effect, a sanctuary city. Virgil Bernero is the mayor of Lansing, and he joins us now. Mr. Mayor, thanks a lot for coming on.
Absolutely, Tucker. I've seen your show. I know you're fair.
Well, I try to be fair, and I also try to get to what the principle is underneath the policy. And I just want to know when it's okay for cities to ignore federal law, just kind of going forward.
Well, probably never. I think we have a federal system, though, as you know. You're a pretty smart guy. I was hoping we're going to be able to have a smart discussion. I passed an executive order, I'm sure you have a copy of it, that we think comports with federal law. My city attorney looked at it. I discussed it at length with my chief of police, and it basically put in writing what was already our modus operandi. It was what we were doing, but we didn't have a written policy. I thought it was important at this time to put it in writing so that there was no confusion with our officers or our citizens. We think it comports with federal law. As you know, we have a federal system, and for your viewers, you know, they should understand, sometimes you got to go back and look this stuff up, and I do too, because we have federal, state, and local, and we have responsibilities. And my primary responsibility, my number one job, Tucker, is to keep people safe. I take it very seriously. For 12 years, I've been mayor, and public safety is job one. After that, economic development. So if Donald Trump or Jeff Sessions think that they can increase safety in my community, I'd like to know about it. I'd be happy to have a discussion with them about it. But we are not ready to federalize our local Lansing Police Department. Well, we don't have that.
They're not asking you, I don't think, to federalize, but not to subvert federal law. And I don't think that legally it's your prerogative to do that. And again, I've asked other mayors the same question. I'd love to hear your response. If your position suddenly became that we're not going to enforce the federal laws on tax evasion, or child pornography, or gun possession, people look at you and say, you don't get to do that because you don't write the federal laws. You're subject to them. And you would say, what? I don't feel like it. What would be your response?
I'd say this, Tucker, and again, this is great. Let's have a reasoned discussion. Let's bring in FBI, state, federal. We have a great relationship with federal authorities, FBI, ATF, and yes, ICE. It is not a top-down relationship. We rely on them, they rely on us. When we need them, they're there most of the time, and when they need us, we're there. If they say we've got to go catch John Doe, violent criminal, we've got their backs. But we are not. I've got about 24 officers at any given time for 120,000 people, citizens. So immigration enforcement is not a priority for us, okay? It just isn't. We have to keep the community safe. We are not immigration officers.
Okay, but you're going to lose, as you know, because the Attorney General announced it, federal funding, which I know that you rely upon, for the
I don't believe that for a minute.
Because you
I don't believe that.
Well, they are. Well, okay, you don't think it may happen, but they're telling you that it's going to happen. And if they push it, they can probably get it done.
And I'm telling you, I'm willing to fight them.
Okay, well, apparently you are.
I'm telling you, I'm willing to fight them.
Apparently you are. But my
we have a federal system. This is a system of laws, not of men. We have a system of laws, not of men.
I'm aware of that.
They can believe what they want.
Okay, got it. But you're saying you're ignoring those laws because you want to, and you're losing federal funding. So hold on, let me finish the question. So if your job is to protect the city and to do what you can for the people of Lansing, why would you risk that except to make a fashionable moral statement?
Because I don't accept. Look, I didn't look for this fight, Tucker. This fight found me. I tried to avoid this fight. But public safety is my job. I didn't wait for Jeff Sessions or Donald Trump. I've been keeping the citizens of Lansing safe for 12 years, and my police chief and the brave men and women of the Lansing Police Department. Don't get me wrong. They do the heavy lifting. We don't need, we're not looking for Donald Trump's leadership. And if you want to talk about what makes people safe, what makes people safe in terms of the police is relationships with community. It's about building bridges and not walls. It's about community policing. It's about trust. Yes, it's about civility.
Okay, got it. I've heard this 1,000 times, and I ask the same question every time. Perhaps you can answer it. Do you have any social science, since criminology is a species of that, it's studied, all this stuff is studied, that shows that when you don't enforce immigration law at the local level, your city gets safer? That there's a causal relationship between the two. Do you have any research on that?
This is the research we have. Community policing works. And again, what I issued in my executive order is a statement of what we're already doing. Crime is going down in Lansing, and we believe in community policing. We believe that the police have to have, and this is something my police chief studies, he talks to other chiefs, they're about building relationships with the community. They're about police credibility and police legitimacy. And so if you're seen as an occupying force, and something that people don't trust.
I'm sorry. An occupying force in your own country. People come into your country illegally. Your job is to enforce the law as a police officer, and you somehow feel guilty because you're an occupying force in a city that you live in, that you're a country you're a citizen of? How does that work?
Tucker,
people come into your country illegal, and all of a sudden you're oppressing them? Like what?
With all due respect, Tucker, what I'm talking about is that our police have worked hard to build a relationship. It's what we do.
Again,
we have a federal system.
Too much, Mr. Mayor.
But it's not too much. But it's not too much. It's easy for white men like us to say that, who are in the majority, who enjoy what we enjoy. But the fact is,
okay. See, I was taking you seriously at the beginning, but this is just buffoonish. Now it's like I'm a white man, so my views on this are less material or something?
That's your perspective. Try to walk in another man's shoes, though. Walk a mile in somebody else's shoes.
I thought you believed in laws. Now you're making racial generalizations?
We're a government of laws and not of men, which is why we believe that what we have is working.
And less valuable? What? Slow down. White men's views are less valuable? I'm not in a position to judge because of my skin color? I was going to compare you to Oval Thomas, but then I thought it's unfair. Now I think it is fair, actually. You would say something like you would attack people on their skin color.
You can be enlightened by considering somebody else's perspective. That's all.
I do consider people's perspective. I consider the perspective of the people who live here.
Do you ever get pulled over for driving while white?
Okay. Now we're just getting into completely crazy talk. You're making generalizations based on race and demeaning your office.
We're getting into the nitty-gritty of policing, which is what I do.
There's nothing precise about what you're saying. You're repeating bumper stickers.
Yes, keeping people safe is what we do.
Dunham. Spare me. All right.
It's what we do every day.
Good luck, Mr. Mayor. Up next, more than 60 million Americans speak a language other than English at home, and that number is rising way quicker than you may realize. We'll talk to someone who says it's critical the U.S. make English its official language to bring the country together. That's next. Plus, Ivanka Trump's last name has made her one of the most hated women in America. Now the first daughter is punching back at her critics. Stay tuned.
Lives here.
America has historically been an English-speaking country, at least for the last several hundred years, but increasingly that is not the case. In 1980, 89% of Americans spoke English in the home. That figure has fallen dramatically ever since. Today, more than 20%, one-fifth of the country, that's 60 million people, speak something other than English at home. Increasingly, the U.S. is a multilingual country. In California, the biggest state, voters just repealed a law that required English lessons, rather school lessons in public schools be taught in English. Mauro Mujica is the head of U.S. English. He's fighting to make English the country's official language. He joins us now. Mr. Mujica, you speak 5 languages. You're born in Chile, international person. You're not against other languages, obviously. Why do you think it's important?
I speak Spanish at home with my American wife.
Then why is it important to make English the national language?
Because it's obvious. Like most things in life that are obvious are difficult to pass in this country.
Yes.
English is the lingua franca of the world today.
Yes.
You know, I travel all over the world almost every month. And wherever I go, I speak English.
Yes.
And when I'm in this country, my country, obviously, I speak English. And if you speak to me in any other language, I would answer you in any other language. We at U.S. English are not against people who speak other languages. We're against the idea of the government functioning in other languages, like Belgium that you mentioned the other day, or Quebec, etc.
Because it divides the country.
It divides the country. We were founded by Senator Hayakawa, who was a linguist and a semanticist, in 1983. Senator Hayakawa was himself an immigrant. He came to this country and he was very concerned that the country would be eventually divided along linguistic lines. Like Ukraine, you know. Half of Ukraine is Russian-speaking, the other side is Ukrainian-speaking, and Latvia, for instance.
Well, sure.
Many, many countries have that problem.
Well, it's such an obvious point, and yet the resistance to this is very strong. Harry Reid on the floor of the Senate a couple of years ago described this as, quote, racist. What is the motivation of the people who...
You just ruined my dinner. But
I felt the same way. But what's the... Yeah, I mean, you debate people like this all the time. What's the motivation of people who don't want English to be the national language?
Well, there are several motivations. Generally, 83% of people in this country approve of the idea of having an official language, English. It's some people not on what is called progressives or leftists. I call them anarchists in this country. We have a group of people, a small group, makes a lot of noise, but who are trying to divide the country along linguistic lines, along sex, along everything.
Yes.
And what we're trying to do is absolutely normal. Instead of trying to function in any one of the 350 languages that we have in this country, we want the government to begin teaching English to immigrants and to help them assimilate. Like Israel. Israel has a system called ulpanim. It's the plural of ulpan. If you immigrate to Israel, they give you money so you don't have to work for 6 months. They send you to an ulpan full-time, and you learn how to be an Israeli, you learn how to speak Hebrew, etc. They help you assimilate. And that's what we should do in this country.
Because they don't hate themselves. Maybe that's,
right.
Maybe that's the key. Mr. Meeker, we're out of time. Unfortunately, I could talk to you for hours. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great to see you. Up next, an actress is lashing out at the First Lady of the United States for not selling the jewelry off her hands. You'll probably guess how rich the actress in question is. Our panel will discuss that coming up. Time now for our panel segment where we bring people on who've been following the rest of the news, or we were totally occupied with covering the Russians fixing the Super Bowl or whatever. A couple stories tonight. First up, Ivanka Trump is a very fortunate woman, obviously, being the rich daughter of the President of the United States. That president happens to be Donald Trump, which has apparently compelled liberals to hate her even more than they hate the nuclear family, which is a lot. Today, Ivanka hit back at her detractors.
I would say not to conflate lack of public denouncement with silence. I think there are multiple ways to have your voice heard. In some case, it's through protest and it's through going on the nightly news and talking about or denouncing every issue in which you disagree with. Other times it is quietly and directly and candidly. So where I disagree with my father, he knows it, and I express myself with total candor. Where I agree, I fully lean in and support the agenda and hope that I can be an asset to him and make a positive impact. But I respect the fact that he always listens. It's how he was in business. It's how he is as president.
Erin Elmore is a former campaign spokeswoman for the Trump campaign. Jillian Turner worked at the White House National Security Council during the Bush and Obama years, and both join us tonight on the set. Jillian, first to you. Is she an effective spokeswoman for her father?
Absolutely. I think she's been kind of the golden media child since almost day one of the campaign. It seems like through no design of her own. You know, she doesn't seem to be excited about doing media. Right. She hasn't done a lot. That's why partially why this interview was a big deal, because she's not out there every day in front of the cameras defending herself, defending her father.
Right.
If you watched the interview, the first half really kind of read like an indictment hearing. Gayle King threw a whole laundry list of criticisms at her. You know, the first 10 questions all began with, "You've been criticized for," or "Your critics have said this."
Kind of like they dealt with Chelsea during the Clinton years.
Oh, totally. Exactly like that.
I remember that.
Chelsea was a little younger. I think she got a pass.
It would be different if she was a 35-year-old woman.
But look, it was a good interview in the sense that it was wide-ranging in spite of the criticisms. She got to share policy positions, and she also got to share a little bit of her personal life, which was great. You know, she talked about living in D.C. and coming from New York and all of that kind of thing.
So I wonder, Erin, I think she's a terrific spokeswoman, and she's obviously so articulate and poised, and seems like a really nice person. Mm-hmm. But her views are not the views of most Trump voters, from what I can tell, at all. Does that matter?
Well, I think I worked with her a lot in the swing state of Pennsylvania, where I'm from. I interviewed her on several different topics, and she always described herself as apolitical, but the issues that she feels strongly about are women's issues: school choice, child care, reforming taxes to be more beneficial for women. So I think she's drawing in a whole new audience that benefits her father as well.
Huh, interesting. Try this one on for size. Now that a Republican is president, apparently the First Lady is expected to dress like a poor person. Today, wealthy actress Alyssa Milano attacked Melania Trump for wearing rings wearing rings, just like rings on your fingers. In her official portrait, she said those rings could be sold to feed the poor, which I guess they could be. I mean, I've thought that many times as I watch Barbra Streisand.
So could your tie, by the way. That fancy tie you've got over there.
This could fund an entire housing block of Section 8.
Don't think we didn't notice.
Thank you. But, like, is that a fair criticism? Maybe it is. No?
I mean, we were talking about this.
Insane.
Do you know what Alyssa Milano is worth? She's worth $45 million. She's not living in a shack by the beach. She's living in a $1.3 million house in Beverly Hills. Shame on her for being another limousine liberal.
$1.3 million house in Beverly Hills is like not.
Well, it's
actually, you're right.
I saw a picture of it. It looked quite impressive, though.
If you're worth 45, why would you have only a $1.3 million house? I would go a little bigger.
Well, the point is she's not giving all of her money to the poor. So
that's true. But I just wonder, look, Melania Trump seems to me, what do I know, but someone who recoils from politics, who does not want to be a symbol of anything, does not want to be involved in the debates of the day. Why the effort to pull her into this?
But people are desperate to pull her into this. You know, every day there's this pressure to get her to Washington, to live in the White House with the president. A huge deal is made about the fact that she is separate and apart from her husband for 6 months. People don't like it. I don't know. I don't quite understand that part of it. I don't understand if that's the more traditional part of the base, recoiling at the idea that this woman wouldn't sort of follow her husband along as he seeks the highest office in the land.
It's total war. It's total war. It's the idea that Trump is so evil that there's nothing you can do to him that's out of bounds.
But what about the supporters who criticize? I mean, his supporters, you know, criticize the same thing. Why aren't they together? Why did she stay with Barron instead of going with her husband? My point being, the criticism is coming from different sides. It's not all from liberals, I don't think.
Interesting.
I think it's
don't
mostly
ask questions
from those
about
liberals.
people's marriages. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
You too.